as it is often referred, I know, but that's what it's called, has ruled that universities cannot consider a prospective student's race in isolation when deciding admission. The ruling ends a decades-long practice of so-called affirmative action. Positive discrimination is the term preferred in the UK, where universities could take race into account in order to improve or at least change diversity. Affirmative action first made its way into US policy in the 1960s following the civil rights legislation, as many all-white schools began admitting minority students. However, the court, just like US society, has divided sharply on ideological lines. Increasingly since then, the 6 conservative justices in the majority heralded this decision as a step towards a more colourblind society where students will be measured by their accomplishments, the quality of their character in King's famous phrase, rather than their race. The 3 liberals, on the other hand, condemned the ruling, arguing that it ignored the ongoing reality of discrimination in America. To discuss this issue and get the latest on the race for the White House, I'm joined from Washington by Jon-Christopher, the White House correspondent for Real Political News. Hello, John.
Simon, a pleasure. You're much better looking than I thought.
Oh, that's because I've replaced the usual host. That's that's very kind of you. So, just give us a little bit of background in your own words. I've given a certain sort of summary of it, but just so that we're on the same page.
I think your summary was fairly accurate. We've been going through the civil rights movement here in this country, equal rights for all. And it's a very interesting and historic day. Today in 1964, Lyndon Baines Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act in front of Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, and J. Edgar Hoover, believe it or not, and others. And it was the beginning of what we considered a real civil rights movement in this country, started by Eisenhower, believe it or not, JFK, moving to LBJ, and we moving through this time. And the court ruling is basically, the ruling is one of what I call the Trump SCOTUS legacy court. And he projected and he predicted that he would be putting conservative judges on the court. And he did just that to satisfy his MAGA Republicans and hoping that he gets reelected again in 2024.
So it's quite interesting to me. There are at least 2 elements here that are separately interesting. One is what you've just said, that what some people regard as a significant strategic legacy of the Trump administration. Some people blame Ruth Bader Ginsburg for not resigning when she had an opportunity to, in fact, and allowing President Obama to replace her. But that has actually backfired to an extent, hasn't it? Because they've overturned Roe v. Wade, which a lot of people think actually fired up the Democratic base during the midterms and saw a much bigger turnout for the Democrats there than might otherwise have been actuated. So maybe this could be another strategic sort of, the law of unintended consequences, if you like.
Well, you're very astute, and I taught politics in the media for 13 years here at university, and you'd be fine. You could come and speak to my class. You really understand the history of it and how we get to this point. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg, in fact, she decided to stick on, and we didn't get an appointee by President Obama, and we had a problem. The Democrats had a problem with that, and now we have what we have. So we have to deal with that. And 2022 was supposed to be a red wave and get the Republicans in there, and they barely kept on to the House, as you know, and they don't have the Senate. So it's going to be a raucous and a very, very, very difficult time for all involved, but except for the political analysts and those who make the ads, for the political ads for 2024.
But in terms of affirmative action itself, one of the issues which was raised repeatedly in the demands that this be revisited was that it had been biased against Asian students, that is, Asian American students, that they were the ones who were missing out. The perception perhaps that it's a black-white issue was overly simplified, and in fact it was highly qualified, highly educated, hard-working Asian students who were being denied places. Is that a fair assessment?
I don't think so. I think I went to a free school. I went to the City University, which is City College, and we had an equal amount of Asian students, and we had many Black and Hispanic, Latinos and Latinas, and this is quite a while ago, and we all felt that we were part of the system. And I think that's what we need to feel, that we are part of the system in this country and we're all treated equally. Now, that is a particular issue that will be dealt with. And the fact is that we'll see how this plays out. But I think it's to deny young people who haven't had the chance to, in their own background and their own social background to be advanced on to university is a shame. And it's not what we're about here in America.
But it wouldn't be denying them a place at university, would it? It's more whether you get into the prestigious universities, whether places like Harvard and Yale have been discriminating against the best qualified students. There are enough other universities for people of all abilities to go to, because it's an extraordinarily profitable business to be in, isn't it? Draining the college funds out of well-intentioned middle-class parents.
Well, I think that some schools are free. If you're in a state, your tuition is much less. If you want to go to Harvard or Yale or Princeton or Stanford, it's going to be a lot more. Now, the fact is, we have another thing called the elite legacy. In other words, if you have a dorm or a building or a school named after you, you basically can get in. I mean, that's the real problem. So that kind of elitism is something that we try to go around and offer a leg up to those students who need one.
Can I just ask you, and this will probably be to wrap up, would you expect Lyndon B. Johnson and so on, when they were drafting and passing this legislation and trumpeting the affirmative action specifically, I think that came a couple of years later, do you think they would have thought that 50 years would have been enough, or was this intention to be forever, that black students should always be given preferential grades, or do you think it was intended to sort of smooth the transition into a new, bright, new, brave new world?
Well, I lived through that era. I lived through the Vietnam era. I lived through the civil rights era. And it was very contentious. It was difficult. And I think LBJ had the forethought to think in advance of that. Remember, many of the things that Kennedy tried to put through, LBJ, because he had such savvy in Congress, actually could get them through. And he's considered quite a hero. It's the Vietnam War that took him down. But we still consider him domestically a very fine president.
Thank you so much, John. Absolute pleasure speaking to you. I'll be in touch about that position offer.